It's the summer break, a chance for the teams to reset and reassess how things have gone so far this year, as well as taking a well-earned rest. But there are still 9 races to go, and 9 opportunities to improve their seasons. So what is the one thing that each team must do to call 2022 a success? Let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. Williams. First up, it's Williams, the team that sit bottom of the standings at the mid-season break, and they've scored just 3 points. They bought some significant upgrades to their car this season, and they clearly have more money to spend in that department. There are lots of options when it comes to something that they could change to call their season a success. They could look to upgrade their driver lineup by giving Albon a more competitive partner for 2023, or they could just look to score more points in the championship. Though it feels unlikely that they'll be able to get to 9th in the standings given they're 17 points behind Aston Martin. So for me, the thing Williams need to change to call 2022 a success is their driver lineup. Right now, after a good 2021 season where they showed signs of progression, they've fallen back. The Doralton Capital era of the team hasn't got off to a good start in these new regulations, and the best way to show their commitment to the sport and improving as a team would be to replace Nicholas Latifi. They don't need a pay driver on their books anymore, and there are certainly better options in the market. It seems like Oscar Piastri is going to McLaren, so there may be a race for Daniel Ricciardo's signature. It does feel unlikely that Ricciardo would want to go to Williams, but it would be an awesome scout for the team if they wanted to show their commitment to recovering. Another option could be to go with Nick de Vries, who was one of the options for Williams when replacing Russell last season. This wouldn't be such a great signing, but I believe it would improve their driver lineup for next year. They will have to hope their car is improved next season so they can climb their way back up into the midfield, and with 2 strong drivers, that's certainly more likely. Aston Martin. Aston Martin next, and the team have already moved quickly to replace Sebastian Vettel with Fernando Alonso, and this is good for the team, as they've shown exactly what Williams need to, and that's the commitment to making the team more successful in the future. One thing Aston Martin do have coming into the summer break is momentum. They've been outperforming AlphaTauri, the team that are 8th in the standings for the last 5 rounds, and they're 7 points behind. There's definitely potential for Aston Martin to get back past them, and if Haas slip up in 7th, there's potential for Aston Martin to get ahead of them as well. The battle for 7th in the standings is very close indeed, and I think with Vettel retiring he'll want to try his best to move them up the championship order. I think it's achievable and definitely something they would like to do to show that they're heading in the right direction going into 2023. AlphaTauri. AlphaTauri is a tricky one to choose one thing that they need to change. They've dropped back with poor momentum in 2022, and I think they've struggled with the regulation changes. Pierre Gasly does seem to have dropped back this year, and I think the Frenchman is really important for the team. If you look at this team setup from the perspective of them just being a Red Bull development team, then the focus should be on giving new talent a chance. But it feels like in recent times, Franz Tost has had more of an influence over who drives for his team. For me, I think that having Pierre Gasly performing at his best is what could give this team the best chance to call 2022 a success. As I mentioned in my recent driver ranking video, Gasly is the biggest faller on this list relative to last season. And I feel like if he was to get the chance to get back up onto top form, the team would improve as a whole. There are some rumours circulating that Pierre Gasly may well be an option for Alpine should they not be able to get Oscar Piastri to drive for them next year. But I think this would leave AlphaTauri in a tricky situation. They do have a contract signed for Gasly in 2023, but I think getting him back to his best should be their priority. I'll be honest, it's difficult to know how they do this, whether they start looking at the direction of development for the car or giving him additional support. But I feel like with Gasly down on form, the team is struggling as well, and I doubt that's a coincidence. Before we take a look at Haas next, I want to take a moment to ask you to consider subscribing to Behind the Drive. According to my YouTube analytics, around 70% of you watching are not yet subscribed. So if you haven't already, please consider hitting the subscribe button if you're enjoying the videos. Haas. Haas have gone into the summer break in very good form. Mick Schumacher has scored his first Formula 1 points, and Kevin Magnussen's form has returned as well. The team didn't bring any major developments until Hungary, and learning from many of the other teams on the grid, it often takes a few races to get familiar with how the car is set up with new parts. I think it's brilliant that Haas have been able to get the new parts on the car in time for the last race before the break. This will give them plenty of time before the next race in Belgium to analyse the data gathered by the team during the running over the race weekend in Hungary. This may mean that they have time to ensure they can maximise their performance through the final 9 rounds, and I think given both drivers are comfortable in the car, there's scope for Haas to potentially even bridge the gap between them and Alfa Romeo for 6th in the standings. I think the Alfa Romeo team have been moving backwards relative to the other midfield cars this season, and there's a chance that Haas could move forward. If they achieve that, then I think they'll certainly be calling 2022 a success. Alfa Romeo. Alfa Romeo next, and I think they have a few challenges going into the summer break. After an excellent start in the season, they've started to fall backwards relative to the other teams. They failed to score points since Canada, and they need to turn that around if they don't want to end up in that battle with Haas for 6th place. But for me, that isn't the team's biggest challenge. They have a much bigger decision to make. Théo Pourchaire is a talented young Sauber driver, and I think they'll want to maximise their driver lineup for 2023. Valtteri Bottas is locked into a multi-year deal, so it's a decision point between the improving Zhou Guanyu and Théo Pourchaire. For me, it's a very difficult decision to make, especially considering there's an unknown in Pourchaire's ability in F1, and Zhou brings a huge amount of money for the team. So I know it's a cop-out, but I'm going to say that Alfa Romeo needs to make the right call on their 2023 driver lineup to call the season a success in 2022, given they've already had a lot of success on track this season. McLaren. McLaren next, and this is an interesting one to choose as well. The team are locked in a battle with Alpine, and at the time of recording, it looks like they've got a plan to change their driver lineup for next year, as they may be dropping Ricciardo and replacing him with Piastri. So their driver lineup could well be both young and very talented for next year. But for me, if they claim 4th place in the standings this year and maintain that position, that would be the best outcome for the team. After such a difficult start to the season with problems in Bahrain, it's impressive that they've done so well, particularly when looking at Lando Norris's performances. If they manage to maintain 4th position, just as they did last year, there could be potential for them to push on from there and start to bridge the gap to the top 3. For me though, if they finish 5th, there's a risk that McLaren and Alpine will become 2 teams that are locked in their midfield positions and seemingly treading water over time. Alpine. Alpine's next, and their situation has changed significantly in the last few weeks. They've gone from having 3 drivers vying for 2 coveted race seats in 2023 to potentially having just 1. If they lose Piastri to McLaren on top of their already confirmed loss of Alonso to Aston Martin, then the priority for the team has to be finding the appropriate driver to fill that vacant seat. Replacing Alonso will never be easy, and there's potentially an option to go back to Daniel Ricciardo, who was so successful with the team in 2019 and 2020. But do they want to be seen to be going on to what could be a backward step? It feels like Ricciardo could be a risk based on the fact that he struggled for 2 seasons with McLaren. It would feel like they have actively lost out to McLaren in the off-track battle at least, given their young talent in Piastri would have gone over to their rival, and the driver that he's replacing would be going in the opposite direction. It's a difficult position for Alpine as they look to the latter stage of the season. 2 big-name drivers in Ricciardo and Alonso have now opted to go elsewhere in the last couple of years, as they believe they would have a better shot at getting race wins and podiums away from the Alpine setup. For me, this is their biggest challenge, and having the right driver lineup going into 2023 will be pivotal in the latter stages of this season. Mercedes. Mercedes next, and this team is making brilliant progress so far this season. For me, I think given their momentum, the one thing that Mercedes needs to do in these last 9 rounds is win a race. They've been knocking on the door for the last few rounds, and it feels like given the reliability concerns of Ferrari and even Red Bull on occasions, there could well be an opportunity for the Silver Arrows to get a race win this year. For me, Mercedes have done an excellent job of keeping themselves competitive in 2022. Their driver lineup has been one of the best in the sport, and the fact that they seem to be in a close battle with Ferrari for 2nd in the standings is, quite frankly, remarkable. For me, the one thing Mercedes need to do right now is get that race win, as the momentum that they could build from that could perhaps be even more beneficial than coming 2nd in the championship. Although, I think achieving either of those feats would be brilliant for the team. Ferrari. Ferrari are in a really tough spot. Leclerc is 80 points behind in the drivers' standings, and Ferrari are 97 points behind in the constructors. They're not completely out of this title race by any means, but Red Bull would have to have some major problems if they were to throw this championship away. I would argue that 2022 will already be seen as somewhat of a failure given the disappointing reliability that the Ferrari team have had, and some of the dreadful strategy calls over the season so far. It feels like the team has thrown away a huge number of points so far this season, and made so many mistakes. So the answer to what Ferrari needs to do if they want to call 2022 a success should be to win the title. But given the current situation, I think it would be best to say that if the team avoids any more strategy blunders through the final 9 races, it will be a sign that Ferrari have turned a corner and perhaps in 2023 they could build on this season, learn from their mistakes, fix the reliability of their power unit and maybe even challenge for the title once again. The team's in a tricky position, and it feels like Mattia Binotto is burying his head in the sand as of the mistakes made in Hungary. So learning and improving is critical for Ferrari in these final rounds. Red Bull. Red Bull is the final team to discuss, and it's difficult to know what more they need to do to call 2022 a success, other than coast to their World Championship. They are clearly the strongest team on the grid right now, and they're looking comfortable out at the front, while their opposition are scoring own goals and tripping themselves up. So I don't believe that Red Bull need to change anything other than to win both of the championships this year, and it looks like they're on the right track. So that's one thing every team needs to do to call 2022 a success. Let me know what you think in the comments.